Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Maryland Department of Environment's Water Quality Standards public hearing regarding the proposed cold water existing use determination for the North Branch Potomac River here in Allegany County. The purpose of today's informational hearing is to provide interested parties with a brief description of the proposed changes and allow opportunity for the public to provide testimony on these changes. Today's public hearing is being held both virtually on the Google Meets platform as well as in person here at the Allegany Western Port Library. Please note it is being recorded and our microphone is quite sensitive, so just watch out for that.
It picks up noise all the way in the back.
Which is wonderful. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your interest and your participation in this public comment process. To introduce myself, my name is Melinda Cutler. I'm a Natural Resources Planner with Water Quality Standards and Analysis Division at MDE. I am joined by Matthew Stover, Chief of the Water Quality Standards Analysis Division at MDE, and we will be the presiding officials for today's hearing. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Michelle, if you could click to the next slide. A recording of today's hearing, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, will be posted to the department's webpage at the following link. Next slide. For our folks that are joining us online, I wanted to quickly point out a few of the virtual attendee controls on the Google Meets platform for folks not familiar with it. The first feature is the mute and unmute button circled in green on the slide. This feature, I believe, is currently disabled, and we will enable it at the beginning of the oral testimony session. At that point, you will see the icon color change to dark red, as shown in the top left image. Once you are recognized to speak, you may click on this button to unmute yourself. Please remember to mute your microphone once you finish speaking. The second button is the raise hand button circled in yellow. So that's the little hand icon. Please use this during the oral testimony portion of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or make a statement. You can click on that hand icon once I direct you to join the online queue and wait to be recognized before speaking. While we are here, I'd like to gauge how many of our online participants do plan to provide a comment. So if folks online could go ahead and click that hand raise button if they plan to make a comment, and we'll count those up. I'll take just a moment or two. Okay. So it looks like I have 2 and maybe a 1, or about 3. Okay. Awesome. Is there anybody else? Okay, great. You can go ahead and click that button again to lower your hand, and then I'll direct you once we get to the oral testimony session. Thank you so much. Okay, so Michelle, next slide. So for the format of today's hearing, it'll consist of a PowerPoint presentation describing the proposed existing use determination for the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany County. A note, while I'll only be presenting on the North Branch Potomac River and Allegany County's existing use determination, the department has 6 other existing use determinations out for public comment. So if there are folks that are joining us that wish to provide any oral testimony regarding any of those, you're welcome to once we go to the oral testimony session. The second portion of today's meeting will be our opportunity for oral testimony. So please hold all comments or questions till that time. Michelle, next slide. For the order of speaking, we'll proceed in the order that is shown on the slide. We'll first take a moment to recognize any elected officials in the room or online that wish to make a comment or statement. We'll then turn it over to Mr. Scott Shoemaker of the Upper Potomac River Commission to provide his comment as the requester of today's hearing, and he has a couple of slides that go along with his comment. We will then proceed with the in-person attendees in the order of the sign-in sheet. So So I believe we had about 4 people there last I saw it. We'll then go to our virtual attendees, starting off. We'll go to our virtual attendees in the order of the Google form. And then if there's any other folks that have a raised hand, we'll turn to them. Once you are called on to speak, you may provide your comment or statement at that time. We ask that all commenters please state your name and, if applicable, your affiliation for the record before providing your comment. Welcome. We only have this space till 7:30 p.m. today, since the library will be closing shortly thereafter. So if you request that comments be limited in time, I think we have about 10 people that plan to provide a comment. So comments could be limited to about 7 minutes in length. I think that would allow us to get to everybody and have everybody have an equal opportunity to speak as well. Okay. On that note, it's not necessary to read aloud written comments to make them a part of the public record. Written comments sent to us either through mail or email will also be accepted and given the same consideration. If you do have a letter that you wish for us or you wish to read into the record today, we suggest you provide us with a written copy of that as well. And those can be, again, mailed or emailed. And I'll have a slide with my contact information at the end of this presentation. All comments, whether written or spoken here today, will be considered and addressed in the department's written public comment response document. They'll be produced after the close of the public comment period. And the public comment period is set to end next week, December 9th. Okay, Michelle, next slide. Okay, so with those housekeeping items out of the way, we'll start off with the presentation portion of today's meeting. Michelle, next slide. To start us off, I will provide a brief background on existing uses and designated uses, what they are and how we identify them in the state. So existing uses, as defined in federal regulations, are described as the use and water quality necessary to protect the use of a waterway that has been achieved by a water body on or after November 28, 1975, whether or not they're included in water quality standards. The Code of Maryland regulations, our anti-degradation regulations, echoes this and establishes that existing uses and their supporting water quality shall be maintained and protected. Michelle, next slide. Existing uses therefore form a baseline or floor of water quality that must be maintained under Maryland's anti-degradation policies. In the case of cool or cold water existing uses, this consists of the use such as biology requiring cooler thermal regimes for their survival and the water quality necessary to protect that use. In the case of cold water biology, temperatures. Next slide. So existing uses are distinct from designated uses. Designated uses are often described as the goals of a water body, whether attained or not. We have 4 main designated use classes in the state. Our use class 1, Warmwater Aquatic Life use. Use class 2, which includes all of our tidal waters. Use class 3, our non-tidal cold water. And use class 4, our recreational trout waters. Could you click? Thank you. So designated uses focus on the attainable condition, while existing uses focus on a past or present condition. So while an existing use condition may fit within one of our currently defined designated use classes, existing uses represents that baseline past or present condition of what has actually been achieved in a water body and must be protected where identified under Maryland's anti-degradation policy. Next slide. To identify cold and cool water uses in the state, the department developed the cold water existing use determinations policy and procedures document shown on the slide. This was developed in collaboration with a diverse advisory committee and sets a standardized method for determining cold and cool water existing uses in the state. This document was incorporated by reference into Maryland's Tier 1 anti-degradation regulations, making it like a regulation itself. Next slide. Following the standardized policy and procedures, the department has proposed 7 new cool and cold water existing uses during this current public comment period. To briefly show these, they include these 3 streams in Harford County, unnamed trip to Jack's Hole, unnamed trip to Broad Creek, and unnamed trip to Michael's Run. Next slide. Dog Creek in Washington County. Next slide. 2 streams of the 2 segments of the North Branch Potomac River in Garrett County and the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany County. You could click. And today's focus will be on the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany County due to the requests that we've received for the public hearing and the comments we've received thus far in the public comment period. Next slide. To better place this existing use in context, this segment is located on the western edge of Allegany County, where we currently are in this library setting. Next slide. To zoom in and point out some major features, go ahead and click. The proposal extends from Luke, Maryland down to Dawson, Maryland. This segment is downstream of both the Savage River Reservoir and the Jennings-Randolph Reservoir, which are 2 bottom release dams. Major tributaries into this section of the river include Georges Creek coming in from the north on the Maryland side and New Creek coming in from the south on the West Virginia side. 2 other features, if you notice in the first red star, that is the site of the former Luke paper mill plant, which closed in 2019. And then the second star is the site of the current Upper Potomac River Commission's wastewater treatment facility, which formerly treated the wastewater treatment flows from the paper mill plant. Next slide. So the current designation of this section of the North Branch Potomac River is use class 1P. That is our Warmwater Aquatic Life, and the P is a sub-designation for public water supply. So that's just an additional designation. The proposed changes for the North Branch Potomac River are use class 3P, or non-tidal cold water, and use class 4P, or recreational trout waters. This redesignation comes with a colder temperature criteria. Next slide. Code of Maryland regulations define use class 3 and 4 waters as the following. Use class 3 and 3P represent waters which have the potential for or are suitable for the growth and propagation of self-sustained trout populations and other cold water obligate species, including but not limited to the stoneflies, caliperla, and swelsa. Class 4 and 4P waters are recreational trout waters, represent those cold and warm waters that have the potential for or are capable of holding or supporting adult trout for put and take fishing and managed as a special fishery by periodic stocking and seasonal catching. Next slide. Going into the proposed existing use determination and rationale for the North Branch Potomac River in the following section, the department proposes an existing use present in the river that is synonymous with the use class 3P and 4P designated use classification in the following sections. You could click.
There's also like
If you could go ahead and click, Michelle. Thank you. So the existing use determination document proposes a baseline class 4P redesignation from the section of Luke, Maryland down to Dawson, Maryland. The department proposes that this section of the river has an existing use that is synonymous with a class 4P waterway. Stations along this main stem of the segment have met class 4P temperature criteria under 75 degrees Fahrenheit for multiple years since 2015. Additionally, Maryland DNR and West Virginia DNR have managed this section of the North Branch as a trout fishery since 1989 to the 1990s, representing over 30 years of trout management in this system. The proposed existing use of this water body is thus described as waters managed as a trout fishery with temperatures not exceeding 75 degrees Fahrenheit. This is synonymous with the description of a Class 4 key waterway, which is again described as waters capable of holding or supporting adult trout for put and take fishing and managed as a special fishery by periodic stocking and seasonal catching. You could go ahead and click, Michelle, and click one more time for the arrows. Additionally, 2 segments located at these blue arrows have existing uses that are synonymous with the use Class 3P designated use. This is our non-tidal cold water. Within these 2 sections, cold water benthic macroinvertebrates, the stoneflies Talaperla, were found in 2023. Additionally, temperatures at these stations have attained Class 3P temperatures for multiple years. At the first blue arrow in Luke, Maryland, temperatures have achieved Class 3P criteria since 2015, with data collection occurring in 2015, 2017, 2021, 2022, and 2023, and they've been consistently meeting Class 3P. The section near McCool, Maryland, at the lower blue arrow, has been meeting use Class 3P temperatures since 2019, with data collection in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, and has been consistently meeting use Class 3P temperature for 4 out of 5 of those data collection years. The proposed existing use for these river segments is thus described as waters supporting cold water benthic macroinvertebrates, the stoneflies Talaperla, with temperatures meeting Class 3P criteria. The existing use of the water body is therefore synonymous with the description of a Class 3P waterway, which is outlined as non-tidal cold water, waters which have the potential for or are suitable for the growth and propagation of self-sustaining trout populations and other cold water obligate species, including but not limited to stoneflies, Talaperla, and sweltza. For more information on the rationale, please refer to the department's written existing use determination report, which is on our webpage, and I believe was sent to the email out to folks. All right, Michelle, if you could click to the next slide. So that includes our brief PowerPoint presentation describing the proposed existing use determination for the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany County. The public comment period for the 7 proposed existing use determinations, including the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany, began on September 6th and was extended to December 9th. Following the public comment period, the department will again develop a written comment response document to all comments that we have received during this comment period. These written responses will be provided in a standalone comment response document that we will post to the department's webpage at the following link. This is our existing use determinations webpage. All our commenters and interested parties, like the folks here today, will be emailed and notified once this is posted. So if you didn't sign in, make sure to sign in with your email address so we can make sure that we can notify you. After addressing all comments and depending on any substantive comments, the department will make a decision on whether to move forward with these proposed existing use determinations. And these will, if moving forward, they will be included in the department's 2025 Internal Review of Water Quality Standards. The department anticipates submitting a notice of proposed action for the 2025 Internal Review late spring of next year. If these existing use determinations are included, including the North Branch Potomac River in Allegany County, these would receive an additional public comment period and public hearing as part of the 2025 Internal Review later next year. Next slide. This is my email and our mailing address if there are any written comments that you'd like to send in. A reminder that the public comment period is set to end next Monday, December 9th. So please make sure to send in any comments by that time. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so we will now open it up for the oral testimony session. Michelle, if you could go ahead and change the settings so folks online can unmute when the time is right. Reminders and time limitations, we have this space till 7:30 today. To give everybody an equal opportunity to speak, limit spoken comment to about 7 minutes in length. If you have any additional information or testimony to share, written testimony is welcome and can be sent to us by mail or email, and we'll be given the same consideration. Just be sure to send that in to us by next Monday. All right, next slide. Okay, just a quick reminder of the order that we'll be proceeding in. I'll first recognize any elected officials that wish to make a statement or comment. We'll then get Mr. Shoemaker's slides up and allow him to have his comment. Then we'll go in the order of our in-person attendees. So I believe I have 4 folks that have said yes, 1 maybe. And then we'll turn it over to our virtual attendees after that. So start us off. Do we have any elected officials in the room or online that would like to make a comment or a statement?
Or any representatives and elected officials also would be included in that.
Certainly. Thank you to the department. My name is Senator Mike McKay. And
Can I interrupt for a second?
absolutely.
If you're speaking, can you kind of come up and stand in front of the screen so that way you're on camera and people attending virtually also see you, they don't just hear your voice?
So the blue light. If you're on stage, you're on the blue light.
That's right.
So Senator Mike McKay, today Delegate Jim Heinball could not join us, but he and I have discussed and we're in unison with these comments. So with the proposed changes, we would actually like to be a pause. And the reason behind the pause is in 2024, in the Maryland General Assembly, there was a bill that the genesis of that bill was to look at the UPRC funding and how it would affect the working class of Western Port, Luke, and Piedmont as for the wastewater treatment plant. That bill genesis came from Chairman Arthur Ellis, who is chair of the Audits Committee and was concerned with the mill closing and how it would be able to perform its duties, but then how it would affect the working class down in the tri-state area, Tri-Towns area. That bill did get passed. It was unanimous in both the Senate and the House. That committee is working right now. It is due to have a report back to the General Assembly before session begins in January. It's about to make its final recommendation. However, there's going to need to be some time to implement that recommendation. So what I would like to see, I haven't found it in Comar where this is required, I say today, but right with a timeline that it has to be done right now. My recommendation along with the delegate would be that we would pause this, wait until the report is back, let the General Assembly figure out what it plans to do. And what it plans to do, to be completely honest, is how is it going to fund this area that when the mill closed, it affected 3 communities immensely. And the last thing I want to do is make a decision on the determination of moving the classes that if some chance by UPRC, Allegany County Economic Development, is able to fix the problem by either having something come in to the mill. Last thing we want to do is shut all the doors down for lack of economic development. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is I understand the need, I understand the science behind it, and I understand the benefits behind it. But they can't outweigh the working class of people in Loop, Westernport, or in Piedmont, because they're already having to deal with a tremendous amount of financial changes and challenges by losing the mill, its location to a east-west corridor, meaning Interstate 68, and then the overall changes that the people that I represent, they cannot afford. So we need to do whatever we can do to make sure that the mill somehow, some way has an opportunity. I believe this report will be part of that. And so I just ask that we pause and then we resume once we know where the outcome is. And it's not an indefinite. I don't want to say that. Allegany County, the UPRC, everybody involved has an internal time clock that is ticking. So it won't be forever. Just ask that we pause it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't sign up this week, I'm sorry. I'm Judy Hamilton. I'm mayor for the town of Westernport. And as you all know, our communities have been greatly impacted the last few years by the loss of the paper mill. So we are in the process of developing a letter with our concerns that we will be submitting by the 9th as well. I am serving on the committee that Mike talked about. So, you know, I agree with him. I think a pause would be beneficial for everybody as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just one little quick. I apologize. Borrow the balance of somebody else's time real quick. So Representative Rick Hillebrand from the West Virginia legislature, he and I and others meet on a quarterly basis. And while I have not asked him about the pause, I do know that through our conversation, he too is concerned about Piedmont, the people that he represents, and Kaiser, how this can affect them. So thank you. Not to put words in this, but we have had that conversation.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room or online? If you're online, you can click the hand raise icon. Take just a moment or two here.
This is for elected officials, please,
Yes, elected officials.
or the representatives.
Okay, so I have Mr. Barclay. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Barclay. I'm the Director of Economic and Community Development for Allegany County. And I'm also representing, since they couldn't make it, the county administrator from Allegany County and the 3 county commissioners from Allegany County. That's the public official situation. We've all discussed the situation, and I believe the county commissioners are going to send a letter as well. They of course, and everyone has expressed the concern for changing these classifications right now. And just as the good Senator Mike McKay has alluded to, since the mill closure in 2019, economic development, both on the Maryland side and the West Virginia side, have been trying to, see what kind of uses could go at the mill and recover the 700 jobs that were lost in 2019. We've tried a lot of different things and a lot of methodologies and had people, kick the tires, so to speak, to be there, but haven't landed any as of yet. But I will say that the rumors kind of been out there, and I guess I'm confirming rumors, is probably before Christmas, Allegany County will enter into possibly a public-private partnership to control the land at the mill on the West Virginia and the Maryland side. And we've had some folks possibly interested in locating, but this is all going to take a lot of time just from us coming in to control. And Maryland Department of the Environment should be happy with the fact that we're going through the proper channels. We did a phase 1 environmental assessment, and phase 2 will be in the future. But we intend to to clean up the site, and probably will be applying for federal funds to do that. And that's going to take likely a year's time for us to do that, and for some of these interested parties to actually come in and to build anything. And there's the concern, right? Is we don't know exactly what users are going to end up there. We're certainly not going to have a paper mill that's there that's going to require 18 million gallons a day of of discharge. But it sure would be nice to have a 3 to 5 million gallon per day reservation in there. And I don't know what that does again to the temperatures, which I read through a lot of the documentation, and I understand those. So I guess what I'm saying is, because things take time, could take a year to clean up, could take a year or two for a company to get in there. I'm echoing the sentiments by our other public officials to at least have a pause on this with respect to trying to gain some jobs and some private investment that we can leverage. And maybe we all end up as winners in the end in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other elected officials online that wish to make a comment? Okay. I think with that, we'll now move on to Mr. Shoemaker. Michelle, if you could go ahead and pull up his slides. Are you comfortable standing, or do you want to see? Okay.
Whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah, what are you comfortable with?
I'm Scott Shoemaker from the Upper Potomac River Commission. And I'm just going to get through the slides. So when I'm done, you can just change the slide. I forget the lady's name.
Michelle, you can just say next slide.
All right. UPRC, we're a local Maryland state agency. We were created in 1935 by an act of the Maryland legislature. I work for a board of commissioners, a 3-member board. One's appointed by the governor of Maryland. One is appointed by the Allegany County commissioners, and 1 member is appointed by the Garrett County commissioners. Next slide. Our authority is to regulate flow in the Upper Potomac River. To do that, we oversaw the construction of Savage River Dam when it was originally constructed, and now we own and operate that facility for the purpose of regulating flow in the North Branch of the Potomac. Our authority was expanded in 1955 to oversee the construction and operation of the waste treatment facility the senator and other representatives were talking about, located in Western Port, Maryland. Next slide. So our authority is to regulate flow in the Upper Potomac. That's a pretty broad statement. We do that by operating Savage River Dam, and its project purposes are flood control, low flow augmentation, water quality, municipal water supply locally, as well as the metropolitan DC area, recreation in the lake, as well as in our tailwater. Next slide. UPRC has supported Maryland DNR fisheries over the years and has supported their effort to promote, manage a cold water fishery on the North Branch of the Potomac. UPRC's ability to manage cold water within the reservoir has played a major role in Maryland DNR's ability to stock, manage, promote this unique cold water fishery. While UPRC does support Maryland DNR's efforts to manage the cold water fishery on the North Branch, UPRC does not support the proposed changes to the designated use classification on the North Branch. Next slide. The proposed designated use changes for the North Branch in Allegany County are all below Savage River Dam. These river sections fall within the Upper Potomac River Commission's regulated flow district. The proposal, as we all know, is to change from a Class 1P warm water fishery to either a Class 2P or a Class 3P or Class 4P cold water classification. Next slide. The Upper Potomac River Commission strongly opposes MDE's designated use changes for the sections of the North Branch of the Potomac, especially below Savage River Dam. On September 27th, we submitted lengthy written comments to MDE as well as to local officials outlining our opposition to the proposed changes. Our written comments requested this public hearing to further discuss MDE's proposal, as well as give the UPRC an opportunity to discuss our opposition to the proposed changes. Next slide. Maryland DNR temperature data collected and submitted to MDE. These conditions are only attained through the cold water management strategies employed by UPRC at Savage River Dam and by the Corps of Engineers at Jennings Randolph Lake. Temperature conditions presented by DNR to MDE are not naturally occurring and are not guaranteed by reservoir operations. Temperatures upstream of Savage River Reservoir under natural ambient conditions do not obtain their cold water designation classification for temperature. And you can look that up on the gauge, the USGS gauge system for this past summer. Next slide. So cold water management at Savage River, what is it? How does it affect temperature of the North Branch of the Potomac? How does it affect other critical functions of Savage River Dam? Next slide. So cold water management at Savage River Dam, on a given year, late winter, early spring, we store all the runoff events from snow melt and cold spring rains. We hold that water for several months until the warm season during the summer, and then release that very cold water through June, July, and August. Every year, we employ this cold water management strategy. In addition to that, we monitor volumes of cold water in the reservoir throughout the summer and work with the Corps engineers and DNR to make sure the adequate cold water to support their cold water fishery in the North Branch of the Potomac. The strategy results in higher river flows, lower river temperatures, and increased dissolved oxygen concentration during the summer months, June, July, and August. The Upper Potomac River Commission and its employees work diligently to provide the cold water conditions necessary to support Maryland DNR management cold water fishery in the North Branch. Next one. The cold water management strategy employed by the UPRC results in river conditions that support the cold water fishery, although these conditions could never be achieved without manipulation and management of early season runoff events. The resulting river conditions are not natural. They are manipulated stream conditions and should not be the basis for regulatory change on the North Branch of the Potomac. Next slide. These are negative recreational impacts because of cold water management. It has a negative impact to whitewater releases in the tailwater, has a negative impact to in-lake boating, in-lake warm water fishing, in-lake cold water fishing, shoreline fishing, warm water fishing on the North Branch of the Potomac. And that's a picture of the upper end of our reservoir from this fall. Next slide. It has cold water management has a negative impact on the public safety. Managing for cold water decreases flood control capacity of the reservoir during the spring and early summer months, subsequently increasing the risk of flooding to the local community. Because we store so early and hold it till summer, we could store later runoff events. So we have a full reservoir for a longer period of time, creating increased risk of flooding. Next slide. Cold water management has a negative impact on our ability to augment low flow river conditions in the fall and winter. Cold water management puts local water supply at risk. This year was a good example. We were almost in a condition where we had to pump water to Westernport to keep them in public water supply. It also has a negative impact on the downstream metropolitan water supply. We have an agreement with Jennings Randolph. If the downstream water utilities call for water to be released for their use, we're to match it by 20%. We could have never done that this year. One, it was dry, but two, we used up all the water during our cold water phase through the summer. Next slide. Historic species of the North Branch. Trout are not indigenous to the North Branch of the Potomac. Trout were only established after the construction of Jennings Randolph Lake. The Corps of Engineers management strategy that employed cold water management, and this was done in the late 1980s. Species native to the North Branch prior to Jennings Randolph and Savage River were all warm water species. Excuse me. Next slide. All the tributaries on the North Branch do not meet the cold water criteria being proposed by MDE for the Upper Potomac. The tributaries do meet the current designation of Class 1 warm water criteria. Next slide. This is what all the elected officials were talking about. The North Branch was the industrial water source for the Luke paper mill for nearly 150 years. The Luke industrial site is currently under demolition, and a new site owner is anticipated in the coming weeks. MDE's proposal is a red flag and may drive away any company considering the Luke industrial site as a significant manufacturing operation. An undeveloped Luke industrial site has major impact on the UPRC's ability to continue the operation of a wastewater treatment facility located in Westernport, Maryland, because of the lack of funding. Next slide. Our final thoughts. UPRC believes MDE's criteria for the proposed designated use changes on the North Branch are narrow. MDE does not take into account Clean Water Act outlines appropriate for considering such a designated use change. Is much broader in our opinion. Temperature data being analyzed is not natural to the stream segment. Dam owners and operators are opposed to MDE's proposal. Elected state, county, and municipal officials oppose MDE's proposal, or at least want to delay or pause it. The proposal puts the community at a higher risk of flood during certain periods of the year. It also puts local and metropolitan water supply at risk, and it also has a negative impact on other recreational interests. Next slide. I guess we're not going to questions, but thanks for your time. I know I run over. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, if we could switch back to that one slide on my presentation. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to look at the sheet, see who else we have in person. Mr. Betzel, you didn't plan to speak, or do you plan to speak?
I'm going to, yes.
Okay, come on.
Good evening, everybody. I thank you for providing this opportunity for this public comment section and for bringing it out here where the people are in this region this impacts. Senator McKay, thank you and Senator Ellis for putting in the legislation to address some of the issues that have a profound effect on what's happening in this region. Just for a little background, I was a former administrator of the Garrett County Sanitary District, where for about 18 years, where we put in numerous sewer facilities and improved water quality in Garrett County that dumped into the Potomac River. We put a new sewer system in Bloomington, a new sewer system in Kitzmiller. We put a new sewer system in Norman, Maryland, that dumps into the Potomac River. And some of the guys from Garrett County Department of Public Works are here, and that's here. When we put the sewer system in Kitzmiller, there wasn't, the river was brown. I mean, it was completely brown. There wasn't a fish, there wasn't any stoneflies or anything else in that river. And so, and actually we put it in, the town had outhouses. In several cases, they had duplexes or maybe triplexes. And they had bushel baskets where the town employees had to take those bushel baskets and haul them to the landfill before the system hit. So, so we've done a lot to try to improve water quality. But when in that time when we're doing that, I remember when they were building Jennings Randolph Lake, and when the lake was completed, I went to the groundbreaking ceremony there, and I remember distinctly a comment that was made when we were there with all the elected officials and everybody. It said, the river was so brown and the water was so acidic, and somebody made the comment, I don't know what official was, somebody made the comment that if you got an aluminum John boat and you want to cross from Maryland over to the West Virginia side on the Jennings Randolph Lake, it would eat the bottom out of it before you got to the other side. That's how bad the water quality was. But that we're really, really lucky that, not lucky, it was once that impoundment was completed, the lake stratified, and almost immediately they started fish. And after they got the stratification and they determined where the fish were, they started leaving out cold water from Jennings Randolph Lake. And then the DNR started net pens, and they put in these huge brood trout stuff, and now we got Potomac from Jennings Randolph down here. We got a world-class trout fishery that we've had at Savage River for years and years in Garrett County. But then DNR brought in some fish, and put some new fish to put in there. They brought in Whirling's disease, destroyed the whole thing. And then Matiki Mines built a facility to treat their mine waste, and as all the other companies that were doing business. And in Garrett County, we've done, in the state of Maryland, regulatory people have done a tremendous job in cleaning up the mine drainage. And so the reason I'm saying all this is, and trying to bring it back to the fact is, wouldn't be for all these things, you wouldn't have the water quality you have. And what you've shown with these improvements, the reason they've been approved is because these things are happening. And now it seems that you're going to penalize us down here because now you have good quality water, and now you want to drop the levels of the classification down. So it's going to make it difficult for us to more difficult, and we're concerned about the possibility of this inhibiting economic development to replace the Luke Mill and what's going on there. And because of that mill is going, I'm a member of the county. I was a member of the I'm a member of the UPRC. I'm a former county commissioner, and I was serving in the Maryland House of Delegates for 16 years. So I represent this whole district in the Maryland House of Delegates, District 1A, all of Garrett County and a big chunk of Allegany County. So I'm the historian maybe here because I've been around so long in this region, but I'm speaking in opposition to these changes, in total opposition to them, because give us a chance to work these things out. Because at the UPRC, we were able to settle with Verso to come up with a settlement that gives us enough money to operate 3 years. And if we don't get enough, if this isn't resolved and we don't come up with some solution, and that's the reason for the bill that Senator McKay's put in, it's going to be all dumped in either the county's hands or the state's hands, and we won't be able to operate. We won't be able to afford it, and the people in Westernport will not be able to pay the bills that what it would cost to operate this facility. So we don't want anything to stand in the road of us being to have some ability and to put something in the road that might be an impediment for someone that would come in and start a new development here. So thank you for the opportunity for making these comments. And I'll repeat, I oppose these changes, and I want to thank Scott Shoemaker for the tremendous job in the presentation.
Thank you. Also, I missed Mr. Stephen Young. You had a question?
Can I speak?
Yes.
My name is Steve Young. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Upper Potomac River Commission. I represent Allegany County on that commission. What I wanted to say was that the UPRC supports the fisheries, providing cold water in the Potomac River. We try to do that, as Scott mentioned, but we don't want to be mandated to do that. That's not one of our mandates. Our mandates are flood control, industrial water supply, public water supply, that sort of thing. So I'm opposed to the regulations. I also co-chaired the committee that is doing the report that Senator McKay talked about. And as Jeff Barkley mentioned before, it's going to be some time until we know what's going to happen on the mill site and what kind of impact that's going to have on the wastewater treatment plant. As Wendell just mentioned, our funding is pretty tenuous going out in the next few years. The other thing that I wanted to mention that we support DNR. We're raising fish for them right now, raising trout in some of our unused tanks to try to help their fishery supply. And the final thing I'd like to say is that if we pause this, nothing's going to change. We're going to continue to help with the cold water releases. I'm sure that Jennings Randolph is, and there's not going to be a change in what happens in the stream. We're still going to have that cold water for the fish, but we don't want to be mandated to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next on my list, I have Mr. Jason Andrick.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Jason Andrick. I'm an Allegany County resident. I'm also a commissioner with the Sport Fisheries Advisory Commission for the state of Maryland. And I also serve as a volunteer basis, Trout Unlimited for Maryland, Delaware, and DC. And I speak in support of the changes. A lot of it, looking to the data that DNR's submitted, especially some of this goes back to when the mill was still in existence. I think you mentioned back to 2015 in some spots for some of this data that's continued on. So we support the changes that are proposed. And then I would also, from listening to some of the other folks here from the community, I think it's valuable to recognize that sounds like there's been a lot of hard work done, by Allegany County, Garrett County, a lot of the different groups and communities here to get us to the position we're in right now with Potomac River. And so I should hope that on the economic side, we can attract an economic partner who's going to want to support, all that good effort that's been done to get us to where we are now. So that's why we would speak in support of it.
Thank you. Okay, I had a question mark for Mr. Charlie Laffey.
No, not.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. I think that captures everybody that I have on my list. Is there anybody else in person you'd like to come to the front?
Yeah, I did change that. So, yes. My name is Kevin Clark. I just want to briefly support Senator McKay and Jeff Barkley's comments. Pause. I'm from the Mineral County Economic Development Authority, and our commissioners couldn't be here today. We've discussed this, but I'm not officially representing them. The economic development efforts are, we've worked really hard along with Allegany County on that. It's a very unique site, and but it's so unique, you can't just get anybody there overnight. It's just not a big square site. But one of the unique aspects is it being right along the river. A pause definitely sounds like a very reasonable request. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think that covers everybody in person. So now I think we're going to turn to our folks online. I did have a couple people that signed up on the Google registration list. So I'll just see they're here. Okay, so I'm going to read out the names that I have on my list first, and then we'll move on to hands later. So the first individual I have on my list is Mr. Kenneth Paval. Mr. Paval, if you're here and you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Michelle Folks are able to unmute themselves?
Yeah, Michelle said they should be good to go, and Kenneth was one of the people that raised their hands when you asked, so.
Okay. Kenneth Fable, you're on there. Please unmute yourself. You'd still like to speak?
Okay, we can circle back to you, if you'd like to raise your hand later. The next person I had on my list was, Mr. Randy Dwyer. Let me see. I believe you are here. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, provide your comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
There's a volume right on
Oh,
your
let me
side.
see.
Let's get the volume up before you start speaking.
Could you
Fine.
speak one more time?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Randy Dwyer. I serve as the chair for the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited, otherwise known as MAC. I also hold a seat on the DNR's Cold Water Fisheries Advisory Committee and speak to you tonight as the chairman of MAC. The Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited consists of multiple local Trout Unlimited chapters across Maryland, including the Maryland TU chapter, Patapsco Valley, Potomac Patuxent chapter, the Seneca Valley chapter, the National Capital chapter, Nemacolin and Allegany TU chapters. Many of our local TU chapter leaders are online with me tonight, and we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this forum. Taken together, our chapters in Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Delaware represent over 4,000 Trout Unlimited members. These members are avid outdoorsmen and women who come from every walk of life. They volunteer thousands of hours annually in their communities and work on conservation projects on the Potomac River and in waters all across the Mid-Atlantic region. The Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited, its chapters leaders, and our 4,000 members support the proposed existing use classifications for the North Branch of the Potomac. The mission statement of Trout Unlimited is to restore, reconnect, and recover. We are proud of the work underway in Western Maryland by the TU Priority Waters Initiative to reconnect streams and tributaries, to remove barriers to fish passage, and to reintroduce native trout wherever possible. The state of Maryland has an excellent track record of properly managing its natural resources and uses science-based evidence to make its determinations. The cold water of the North Potomac now holds a strong, naturally reproducing trout population and supporting insect life. The data submitted by the DNR to DME, or the MDE, for this proposed existing use determination is clear, and we appreciate the science-based approach and overwhelming findings. The North Branch of the Potomac is literally trying to bounce back to life. Today, some refer to it as the Madison River of the East, but this has not always been the case. Collectively, we should recognize that the cold waters from Jennings Randolph, from Savage River, along with the recent removal of the paper mill in Luke, is allowing life to come back into the North Branch much farther downstream than previously thought. I do not see this as a zero-sum situation, meaning environmental protections versus economic vitality to the communities along the North Branch. The goals of one should not succeed in spite of the other, but rather work together to have the proper and necessary cold water classifications along with strong local communities. In closing, Trout Unlimited, the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited, supports the proposed existing use classifications, and we urge DNR and MDE to continue its science-based approach to monitoring all sections and to apply the appropriate existing use determinations with consistency to all segments of the North Branch of the Potomac River. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Lisa, can you hear me? This is Ken Pable. It took me a while to figure out how to unmute myself.
No worries. All right, would you like to go ahead and state your name, affiliation, provide your comment?
Sure. Yes, my name is Ken Pable, and I have a long history with the North Branch, which began as a fisheries biologist for Maryland DNR Fisheries. And I wanted to give you a little history. Our studies on the river started in about 1980, water quality studies from Kempton all the way to Pinto. So fisheries has looked at this for quite a number of years. For 20 years, I was Western Regional Fisheries Manager, and I retired in 2005. And the current staff of Fisheries Division has continued to work, and I think it's a huge success story regarding the development of these fisheries resources, trout fishing resources. Since before 2005, a little bit, but for about 20 years, I've worked seasonally as a float fishing guide on the North Branch. And when I began, there was only 2 guides. Now there are about 10 fishing guides who, full and part-time, who float guide on the North Branch. And we have collectively seen a great increase in the number of private boat owners. I wanted to note that in 2010, Maryland DNR commissioned a study by Downstream Strategies of Morgantown, West Virginia, to estimate the annual value of the trout fishery in the North Branch. And at that time, they estimated it to be $3 million a year. And since that time, the interest, the number of guides, all that has increased significantly. And so therefore, the economic impact has as well. So, and I guess I want to address a couple of points I heard mentioned, the increase in flood probability as a result of cold water management. I'd like to note that the Jennings-Randolph Dam has 4 major legislative purposes, and the number 1 legislative purpose is flood control. Number 2, I believe, is water quality management, and 3 is flow augmentation, and fishing recreation is the 4th priority. So I don't want folks to get the impression that the dam is being operated with trout as any kind of primary purpose. It's something that they're able to do and have done successfully for probably 35 years. And that's how long, well, to have people, these people who hire fishing guides, by the way, are not local generally. They travel, they stay in hotels, they eat, they spend money locally. So it is a significant economic benefit. So, and obviously, the water quality, the current designation of Class 1 has a 90-degree limit, which is well over the critical thermal maxima for trout. And in fact, it's lethal. And the fact that we've been having a recreational fishery for all these years, literally decades, I think demonstrates that what DNR proposed is logical and well-founded and fits the biological status and temperature regimes in the river. So I'll just close by saying, and I think I can speak for these other fishing guides, and that they also support it. And by the way, I'm the president of the local Trout Unlimited chapter, the Allegany chapter, and our chapter, as Randy Dwyer pointed out, is one of those, part of the Mid-Atlantic Council that strongly supports these proposals. So I'd just like to say in closing that I think I'd like to commend DNR Fisheries for developing these reclassification proposals and for developing the case, the biological case, water quality case, to support those classifications, and I urge MDE to adopt them. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. All right. I think we will now just double check my list. We'll now turn it over to any remaining virtual attendees. So at this time, if you have not provided a comment, go ahead and click the hand raised icon. And we'll go in the order of the remaining raised hands and commenters. I'll take a moment or two, allow folks to click to raise their hand if there's any others. Okay. Hearing nobody.
Michelle there were 3 who had raised their hand originally, Randy, Jeff, and Kenneth.
Yeah, I think we captured all 3 of them.
I lost
So
track, sorry.
no worries. So I think that covers everybody. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak or provide a comment? Okay. With that, I think we've gone through everybody with time to spare. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. You are all a critical piece to this process, and I thank you for your interest in taking the time out of your evening to join us and provide us with your comments this evening. So thank you again. And with that, we'll close this public hearing. Thank you.